killed in shootings. Now she hopes she won't lose her grandchild. This is video from February 2nd on Singleton Lane when police say someone shot 20-year-old Shaniyah Rodriguez. It was around 5:45 in the morning, and she was 8 months pregnant at the time. Shaniyah died, but her daughter, who was delivered by emergency C-section, is still at Grady Hospital fighting to survive.
A neighbor heard a gunshot and looked out the window, saw her laying there, and they're the ones who called 911. And if it wasn't for that, like, I might not have my granddaughter right now. When do we as a community come together and say enough is enough? Like, there's enough young people dying.
Rodriguez has lost 2 young people to this kind of violence. Her son, Niger, was shot and killed in Carrollton. He was 13. She says someone broke into a home and intended to shoot someone else, but instead killed her son. Now she prays her granddaughter will live a full and safe life.
The sun had barely risen over the dilapidated facades of Brannan Hill condominiums in Clarkston, Georgia. At 5:45 a.m. on February 2nd, 2023, the quiet morning was shattered by gunshots echoing through the complex. A resident, startled awake by the sound, ventured outside to investigate and made a horrifying discovery. A young woman lying motionless on the ground, blood pooling around her head. This wasn't just any victim. 20-year-old Shaniyah Rodriguez was 8 months pregnant, her belly swollen with the daughter she had already named Milliani. As first responders rushed to the scene, they faced a desperate race against time to save 2 lives hanging by a thread. "We have a pregnant female with a gunshot wound to the head," the dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. "Expedite medical assistance." The gravity of the situation was immediately apparent to everyone involved. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize Shaniyah before transporting her to Grady Memorial Hospital, where doctors immediately prepared for an emergency cesarean section. What makes this case particularly devastating isn't just the brutality of the attack, but the identity of the person responsible. As investigators would soon discover, the bullets that tore through Shaniyah's skull weren't fired by a stranger or random assailant. They came from someone she trusted completely, someone who had been welcomed into her family, who called her mother Mom, and who was the father of the baby girl fighting for her life inside her. 7 rifle shell casings littered the ground near where Shaniyah fell. A dark-colored SUV was seen speeding away moments after the shots rang out. But the most damning evidence would come from the digital footprint left behind, a trail that would lead directly to Diamonte Haithcoats, the man who had promised to build a life with Shaniyah and their unborn daughter. In the hours after the shooting, as doctors performed miraculous interventions to deliver baby Milliani and keep Shaniyah alive, no one could have predicted the months of heartbreak that would follow. No one could have imagined that this case would ultimately claim not 1 life, but 2, leaving a grandmother to mourn both her daughter and granddaughter, the 3rd and 4th family members she would lose to gun violence. This is the story of Shaniyah Rodriguez, a young woman on the threshold of motherhood whose life was cut tragically short. It's a story about trust betrayed in the most violent way possible. It's about a family's resilience in the face of unimaginable grief. And it's about the deadly intersection of intimate partner violence and firearms that continues to claim lives across America. Have you ever witnessed someone you trusted completely transform into someone unrecognizable? Someone capable of terrible things you never thought possible? Share your thoughts in the comments below as we explore the heartbreaking case of Shaniyah Rodriguez and the man who took everything from her. Welcome to Dark Trace Crime Stories. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We dive deep into real stories that matter. To our returning viewers, thank you for always showing up. Your support means everything. Born and raised in Georgia, Shaniyah Monet Rodriguez grew up surrounded by the love of a tight-knit family, particularly her devoted mother, Adrienne. Those who knew Shaniyah described a young woman with a bright smile and even brighter future, someone who embraced life despite having already experienced profound loss at a young age. By 20, Shaniyah had developed into a resilient young woman with dreams that extended far beyond her years. Her relationship with her mother transcended the typical parent-child bond. They were confidants, best friends who shared everything. This connection only deepened when Shaniyah discovered she was pregnant. Adrienne attended every doctor's appointment, helped prepare the nursery, and collected ultrasound images of her future granddaughter with excitement only a grandmother-to-be could understand. "We were so excited," Adrian would later recall during court testimony. "I went to every appointment with her. We had the sonograms, the baby items, everything was ready." But the Rodriguez family story was already marked by tragedy long before Shaniyah's death. Nearly a decade earlier, they had endured an unimaginable loss when Shaniyah's younger brother, Nizir, was murdered during a home invasion. He was only 13 years old. The pain of this loss was compounded when the accused was acquitted, leaving the family without closure or justice. Adrian kept Nizir's memory alive, just as she would later preserve Shaniyah's room exactly as she left it, a testament to a mother's enduring love in the face of overwhelming grief. Despite this family trauma, Shaniyah approached her pregnancy with joy and anticipation. She had already chosen a name for her daughter, Milliani, and spent hours imagining the life they would build together. At 8 months pregnant, Shaniyah's world revolved around preparing for motherhood. Her phone contained countless notes about baby names, nursery ideas, and parenting tips. She had created Pinterest boards filled with baby clothes and first birthday party themes, planning far into a future she would never see. Friends recalled how Shaniyah would talk about teaching Milliani to read, taking her to dance classes, and one day watching her graduate. She envisioned a childhood for her daughter filled with the security and love that forms the foundation of a happy life. Shaniyah wanted to be the kind of mother who was both nurturing and strong, qualities she had learned from Adrian. The nursery in Adrian's home stood as physical proof of these dreams, a crib adorned with pink bedding, stuffed animals arranged neatly on shelves, and tiny clothes folded in drawers, waiting for a baby who would never wear them. Sonogram images were proudly displayed, showing the profile of baby Milliani, her tiny hands and feet already fully formed. What makes Shaniyah's story particularly heartbreaking is how close she came to realizing these dreams. Just weeks away from her due date, she had already overcome morning sickness, felt her daughter's first kicks, and watched her body transform to accommodate new life. She had done everything right, taken prenatal vitamins, avoided harmful substances, attended every medical appointment, all to ensure her daughter would have the healthiest possible start. No one could have predicted that the greatest threat to both Shaniyah and Milliani would come not from pregnancy complications or health issues, but from someone who should have been their greatest protector, the baby's father, Diamonte Haithcoats.
I missed you. I missed you too. Oh my God.
Diamonte Haithcoats entered Shaniyah's life like many modern relationships begin, through mutual friends and social connections in the Atlanta area. At 24, the Stone Mountain native was 4 years older than Shaniyah, projecting confidence and charm that initially drew her to him. Their relationship progressed quickly, and when Shaniyah discovered she was pregnant, Diamonte appeared to embrace the role of expectant father. To the outside world, particularly to Shaniyah's family, Diamonte presented himself as devoted and caring. He attended family gatherings, participated in discussions about the baby's future, and even helped prepare the nursery. Most significantly, he formed what seemed to be a genuine bond with Adrian Rodriguez, Shaniyah's mother. Their relationship grew so close that he began calling her mom, a term of endearment that reflected his apparent integration into the family unit. "He called me Mom," Adrian would later testify, her voice breaking with emotion. "I trusted him. We all did." This trust wasn't given lightly, especially by a family that had already experienced the violent loss of a child. The Rodriguez family welcomed Diamonte as one of their own, believing he would protect and care for both Shaniyah and their unborn granddaughter. But behind closed doors, the relationship was deteriorating. As Shaniyah's pregnancy progressed, subtle changes in Diamonte's behavior began to emerge. Friends noticed He became increasingly controlling over Shaniyah's movements and social interactions. He would frequently check her phone, question her whereabouts, and grow irritated when she spent time with family without him. By the beginning of 2023, with Shaniyah 8 months pregnant, the tensions had escalated significantly. Text messages recovered during the investigation revealed arguments about money, Diamonte's commitment to fatherhood, and his unexplained absences. In one particularly troubling exchange, Shaniyah questioned whether he was seeing other women, a suspicion that investigators would later confirm was well-founded. What's most disturbing is that Shaniyah recognized the danger she might be in. In the weeks before her murder, she confided in a close friend about her deteriorating relationship with Diamonte. "Things are falling apart," she wrote in a text message that would later become evidence in court. "I'm scared about what he might do." This fear wasn't unfounded. Neighbors reported overhearing heated arguments coming from Shaniyah's apartment. During one incident, approximately 2 weeks before the murder, a neighbor saw Diamonte storming out of the apartment, slamming the door so hard that pictures fell from the wall inside. When the concerned neighbor checked on Shaniyah, she downplayed the incident, saying, "It's nothing. He just gets angry sometimes." Despite these warning signs, Shaniyah maintained hope that Diamonte would change once their daughter was born. She showed friends ultrasound images telling them, "Once he sees her, everything will be different." This optimism, tragically misplaced, is common among victims of escalating domestic abuse. The belief that a significant life event will somehow transform their partner's behavior. What Shaniyah couldn't have known was that Diamonte was already planning to end the relationship in the most permanent and violent way possible. Phone records would later reveal that he had been researching firearms online and had made several calls to a known gun dealer in the weeks leading up to the murder. He had also been systematically withdrawing cash from his bank account in small amounts, creating a financial cushion for what investigators believe was a planned disappearance after the crime. Perhaps most chilling was Diamonte's behavior at what would be Shaniyah's final prenatal appointment. Attending alongside Adrian, he appeared engaged and excited, asking the doctor questions about the baby's development and even purchasing a small stuffed animal from the hospital gift shop. Hours later, he would search online for gunshot wounds to the head and survival rates. The disconnect between Diamonte's public persona and private actions represents the most dangerous aspect of intimate partner violence. The ability of abusers to compartmentalize, to present themselves as loving and supportive while methodically planning violence. For Shaniyah, this deception would prove fatal. The final 24 hours of Shaniyah Rodriguez's life began like any other day. On February 1st, 2023, she spent the afternoon with her mother, discussing final preparations for baby Milliani's arrival. They reviewed the hospital bag packed and ready by the door, containing tiny newborn outfits and a special blanket Adrian had purchased for her granddaughter. Security camera footage from a nearby store captured Shaniyah and Adrian shopping for last-minute baby items, their expressions animated with excitement as they examined infant clothes. That evening, Shaniyah received multiple calls from Diamonte. Phone records would later show a series of conversations between them, with the final call lasting just under 4 minutes at 9:47 p.m. A text message from Diamonte at 10:15 p.m. simply read, "I'll see you in the morning." Shaniyah replied with a heart emoji, her last digital footprint. What happened in the pre-dawn hours of February 2nd would later be reconstructed through a combination of witness statements, surveillance footage, and digital evidence. At approximately 4:30 a.m., a dark blue Hyundai Palisade, later confirmed to be stolen, entered the Brannon Hill condominium complex on Singleton Lane in Clarkston, DeKalb County. The vehicle circled the parking lot twice before stopping near Shaniyah's building. At 5:15 a.m., Shaniyah's phone connected via Bluetooth to the Hyundai Palisade, a crucial piece of evidence that would later link Diamonte to the scene. This digital handshake between devices suggested that Shaniyah had entered the vehicle, likely believing she was going for an early morning drive with the father of her child. What happened next inside that vehicle remains known only to Diamonte, but the outcome is tragically clear. At 5:38 a.m., residents reported hearing a rapid succession of gunshots. 7 shots in total, fired from a rifle at close range. By 5:40 a.m., surveillance cameras captured the Hyundai Palisade speeding away from the complex, running a red light at the nearby intersection. At 5:43 a.m., a resident named Marcus Johnson stepped outside after hearing the gunshots. In the dim morning light, he discovered Shaniyah lying on the ground near the parking area, blood pooling around her head. Johnson immediately called 911, his voice shaking as he described the scene to the dispatcher. "There's a young woman here, she's been shot," he reported. "She's pregnant. Please hurry." Johnson stayed with Shaniyah, applying pressure to her wound with his jacket while waiting for paramedics. He would later tell investigators that she was unconscious but breathing shallowly, her pulse weak but present. "I kept talking to her," Johnson recalled. "I told her to hold on for her baby." DeKalb County Emergency Services arrived at 5:52 a.m., just 9 minutes after Johnson's call. Paramedics immediately recognized the severity of Shaniyah's injuries, a gunshot wound to the head with significant blood loss. They also noted her advanced pregnancy, which complicated treatment protocols and created a dual medical emergency. The ambulance departed for Grady Memorial Hospital at 6:04 a.m. with lights and sirens, navigating morning traffic at dangerous speeds. Radio communications between the ambulance and hospital prepared the trauma team for their arrival. By 6:27 a.m., Shaniyah was in the trauma bay, surrounded by a team of doctors fighting to save 2 lives. Dr. Melissa Kwan, the lead trauma surgeon on duty, made the critical decision to perform an emergency cesarean section. With the mother's condition so grave, the baby's best chance for survival was immediate delivery, Dr. Kwan would later explain in her testimony. At 6:52 a.m., baby Milliani was delivered, weighing just 4 pounds, significantly underweight even accounting for her premature birth. While one medical team worked to stabilize the newborn, another focused on Shaniyah. She underwent emergency neurosurgery to relieve pressure on her brain and remove bullet fragments. The operation lasted over 5 hours, with surgeons fighting against overwhelming odds. Shaniyah survived the surgery, but remained in critical condition. For the next 2 days, Shaniyah Rodriguez maintained a vigil between 2 hospital rooms, one where her daughter lay unresponsive, connected to life support, and another where her tiny granddaughter fought for every breath in the neonatal intensive care unit. On February 4, 2023, at 3:17 p.m., Shaniyah Rodriguez was pronounced dead, never having regained consciousness. She never got to see or hold her daughter, the child she had spent months preparing to welcome into the world. As this tragedy unfolded in Atlanta, similar scenes played out across America, a country where gun violence and domestic abuse intersect with devastating consequences every day. What state or country are you watching from? Has gun violence affected your community? Share your experiences in the comments below as we continue to examine how Shaniyah's killer was brought to justice.
Right now, a newborn baby is in the hospital fighting to survive as DeKalb County police search for the person who shot and killed her mother. The family says Shaniyah Rodriguez was 8 months pregnant when someone shot and killed her on Singleton Lane at the beginning of this month. Fox 5's Alex Whitler joins us live now. Alex, you spoke to that woman's mother. She not only lost her daughter, but her 13-year-old son to gun violence.
Just a heartbreaking situation for this family. Shaniyah Rodriguez says she's too angry to cry right now. She took us inside of her home and showed us just how excited Shaniyah was preparing to become a mother and give birth to a baby that she never met.
All her ultrasounds and stuff, the last one was 32.
DeKalb County detectives were already processing the crime scene at Brannon Hill condominiums. The morning sun illuminated 7 rifle shell casings scattered across the pavement, physical evidence of the violent attack. Forensic technicians photographed and collected each casing, noting their distribution pattern suggested the shooter had fired from a stationary position, likely from inside a vehicle. Detective James Ramirez, the lead investigator assigned to the case, immediately recognized the severity of the crime. When we have a pregnant victim, we're essentially investigating an attack on 2 people, Ramirez would later explain. The urgency couldn't be higher. Witness statements quickly provided the first significant lead. Multiple residents reported seeing a dark blue SUV speeding away from the complex immediately after the gunshots. One witness, who had been walking his dog, described the vehicle as a newer model, possibly a Hyundai, and noted that it had run through a stop sign at the complex exit like the driver was desperate to get away. This description matched footage captured by surveillance cameras positioned at the complex entrance. The video clearly showed a dark blue Hyundai Palisade entering the complex at 4:30 a.m. and leaving at high speed at 5:40 a.m., just minutes after the shooting. The vehicle's license plate was partially visible, enough for investigators to determine it had been reported stolen from a shopping center parking lot 2 days earlier. The stolen Hyundai was discovered abandoned behind a vacant commercial building approximately 7 miles from the crime scene on February 3rd. Inside, forensic technicians found crucial evidence: blood spatter on the passenger seat consistent with a gunshot wound, and a single fingerprint on the driver's side door handle. The vehicle's Bluetooth system provided another vital clue. It had connected to Shaniyah's phone at 5:15 a.m. on the morning of the shooting. While processing the vehicle, detectives received information from Shaniyah's mother about Diamonte Haithcoats, the father of her unborn child. Initially interviewed as a person of interest rather than a suspect, Haithcoats presented investigators with his first alibi. He claimed to have been at his apartment in Stone Mountain all night, sleeping. "I haven't seen Shaniyah in days," he told Detective Ramirez during his first interview on February 3rd. "We broke up weeks ago." When asked about the pregnancy, Haithcoats made a statement that immediately raised red flags for investigators. "I'm not even sure the baby is mine." This contradicted everything Adrian Rodriguez had told police about Diamonte's involvement in the pregnancy and his relationship with her daughter. It also contradicted digital evidence that was rapidly accumulating. Cell phone records obtained through an emergency warrant showed Haithcoats' phone connecting to towers near the Brannon Hill condominiums at the time of the shooting. His phone then traveled away from the area, connecting to towers along a route that matched where the Hyundai was eventually found abandoned. Even more damning, a search of Haithcoats' phone revealed he had deleted his call history and text messages with Shaniyah, but not before Google's automatic backup had preserved them in the cloud. These recovered messages showed he had arranged to meet Shaniyah early that morning, contradicting his claim that they hadn't been in contact. When confronted with this evidence during a second interview on February 5th, Haithcoats changed his story. He admitted to seeing Shaniyah that morning, but claimed he had dropped her off at the complex and left before any shooting occurred. "Someone else must have done this after I left," he insisted. But the digital trail told a different story. Haithcoats' Google account showed searches for gunshot wound survival rate and how to clean blood from car upholstery in the hours after the shooting. His location history, despite attempts to delete it, showed him traveling to the location where the Hyundai was abandoned. The fingerprint found on the vehicle's door handle was confirmed as matching Haithcoats on February 10th. That same day, ballistics tests connected the shell casings to a rifle registered to Haithcoats' cousin, a weapon reported missing from the cousin's home just days before the shooting. With evidence mounting, detectives obtained an arrest warrant. On February 20th, 2023, 18 days after the shooting, a tactical team surrounded Haithcoats' new residence, a motel room on the outskirts of Atlanta, where he had been staying under a false name. He surrendered without incident, but maintained his innocence, telling officers as they placed him in handcuffs, "You've got the wrong guy. I loved her."
They were like glued to the hip, and it just seemed like she couldn't do anything without him.
This mother wishes she realized how toxic her daughter's relationship was before DeKalb County Police accused her daughter's boyfriend of murder back in February of 2023. Defendant Diamonte Haithcoats sat in the DeKalb County courtroom Tuesday and showed no emotion as Adrian Rodriguez testified about why she believes he shot her daughter Shaniyah in the head while Shaniyah was 7 months pregnant. Here's a phone call Rodriguez recorded with the defendant when she started thinking he could be the killer. He never told Rodriguez what happened that night at the Brandon Hills apartment complex. Instead, police say he went on the run for about a month. During that time, Rodriguez was doing everything she could to save her granddaughter. She said the defendant was never concerned about Shaniyah or his daughter surviving a shooting he blamed on someone else.
I tried everything to fix that mistake. That baby was supposed to be here.
While investigators built their case against Diamonte Haithcoats, Shaniyah Rodriguez faced an unimaginable reality. Her daughter Shaniyah had been declared brain dead on February 4, 2023, just 2 days after the shooting. Hospital staff gently explained that despite their best efforts, the damage to Shaniyah's brain was too severe. At 3:17 p.m., surrounded by family, Shaniyah Rodriguez was removed from life support. She was just 20 years old. "I held her hand until the very end," Adrian later recalled. "I told her that I would take care of her baby, that I would make sure Milliani knew how much her mother loved her." But even as Adrian mourned her daughter, another fight was unfolding in the neonatal intensive care unit. Baby Milliani, delivered by emergency C-section while her mother was dying, faced overwhelming challenges from the moment she entered the world. Born 2 months premature and weighing only 4 pounds, her tiny body struggled with the basic functions of life. "She was so small," Adrian said. "Her hand was barely bigger than my thumbnail." Milliani required a ventilator to breathe and a feeding tube for nourishment. Her premature lungs weren't fully developed, and doctors warned Adrian that the baby's prognosis was guarded at best. Despite these dire circumstances, Adrian channeled her grief into caring for her granddaughter. She established a daily routine that hospital staff came to expect. Arriving early each morning, Adrian would sit beside Milliani's incubator for hours. She read children's books aloud, sang lullabies, and talked constantly to the infant about her mother. "I wanted her to know her mother's voice through mine," Adrian explained. "I told her stories about Shaniyah, how excited she was to be a mom, how she had picked out Milliani's name, how she had already filled the journal with letters to her daughter." Hospital staff noted that during Adrienne's visits, Milliani's vital signs often stabilized. The power of human touch and voice seemed to strengthen the fragile newborn. Nurses encouraged Adrian to participate in kangaroo care, holding Milliani skin to skin against her chest when the baby's condition permitted. For 4 months, this became Adrienne's life, a daily pilgrimage to the hospital, navigating between hope and despair. Milliani had good days where she seemed to be gaining strength, growing from her birth weight of 4 pounds to 14 pounds. There were moments when she opened her eyes, seemed to focus on Adrienne's face, even grasped her grandmother's finger with surprising strength. But there were also setbacks. Infections that required powerful antibiotics, episodes where Milliani stopped breathing and needed resuscitation, procedures to address complications from her premature birth. Through it all, Adrian remained steadfast, becoming such a fixture in the NICU that doctors often consulted her before making decisions about Milliani's care. "She's a fighter, just like her mother," Adrian would tell visitors. "She's going to make it." The hospital became a second home for Adrian, who had already lost so much. Her son Nizir had been murdered at age 13 in a home invasion nearly a decade earlier. Now Shaniyah was gone too. Milliani represented not just her granddaughter, but a living connection to Shaniyah, the last piece of her daughter left in this world. Then came June 19, 2023. After showing signs of improvement for several days, Milliani suddenly deteriorated. Her oxygen levels dropped precipitously, and her tiny body, which had fought so hard for so long, began to fail. Despite the medical team's desperate efforts, baby Milliani died in Adrienne's arms at 2:43 p.m., exactly 4 months and 17 days after her birth. "Heartbreak on top of heartbreak," was how Adrian described it. She began wearing a necklace with 2 hearts, one for Shaniyah, one for Milliani, symbols of the 2 generations taken from her by a single act of violence. In the span of less than 5 months, Shaniyah Rodriguez had lost both her daughter and granddaughter, leaving her with only one surviving child. The double funeral that followed brought hundreds of community members together, many of whom had followed Milliani's journey through social media updates and local news coverage. The trial of Diamonte Haithcoats began on November 7, 2023, 9 months after Shaniyah's murder and 5 months after baby Milliani's death. The DeKalb County Courthouse was filled to capacity, with family members, media, and community advocates occupying every available seat. Haithcoats, dressed in a Navy suit provided by his public defender, showed no visible emotion as he entered the courtroom. District Attorney Sherry Boston personally led the prosecution, signaling the high priority her office placed on the case. "This is not just a murder case," Boston told the jury during opening statements. "This is the deliberate elimination of 2 generations of a family, a young mother and her unborn child." The charges against Haithcoats were extensive: malice murder, 2 counts of felony murder for both Shaniyah and Milliani, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. If convicted on all counts, he faced multiple life sentences. Over the next week, prosecutors methodically presented their case. Forensic experts testified about the 7 rifle shell casings found at the scene, explaining how the distribution pattern indicated the shooter had fired from a seated position, likely from inside a vehicle. The medical examiner detailed Shaniyah's fatal injuries, describing the devastating path of the bullet through her brain. Digital evidence formed the backbone of the prosecution's case. A forensic analyst walked the jury through Haithcoats' phone records, showing his location near the crime scene at the time of the shooting, followed by his movement away from the area. The analyst also presented recovered text messages between Haithcoats and Shaniyah, revealing his request to meet her early that morning. Perhaps most damning was the Bluetooth connection data, showing Shaniyah's phone had connected to the stolen Hyundai Palisade minutes before the shooting. The same vehicle Haithcoats' fingerprint was found on, and the same vehicle seen fleeing the scene. On the trial's 4th day, Shaniyah Rodriguez took the stand. The courtroom fell silent as she described her relationship with Haithcoats, whom she had welcomed into her family. "He called me Mom," she testified, her voice steady despite her grief. "I trusted him with my daughter's life." Adrienne recounted the months of Shaniyah's pregnancy, showing the jury ultrasound images she had saved on her phone. She described the nursery they had prepared together, and how Haithcoats had helped assemble the crib where Milliani would never sleep. Then, with remarkable composure, she detailed the 4 months she spent at Milliani's hospital bedside, watching her granddaughter fight for a life that had barely begun. "I'll never know why," she said, looking directly at Haithcoats. "I'll never know how it got to that point." Throughout Adrienne's testimony, Haithcoats remained expressionless, never meeting her gaze. He did not testify in his own defense, and his attorneys presented little evidence to counter the prosecution's case. Their primary argument, that the evidence was circumstantial, failed to resonate with the jury. After just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty on all counts. As the forewoman read the verdict, several jurors wiped away tears. Haithcoats showed no reaction, staring straight ahead as the reality of his future settled over the courtroom. Judge Yolanda Parker-Smith proceeded immediately to sentencing. "In my years on the bench, I have rarely seen a crime that combines such calculation with such betrayal," she stated. "You took not just 1 life, but 2. You destroyed not just a woman, but the future she carried within her." On May 9, 2025, nearly 2.5 years after the crime, Judge Parker-Smith sentenced Haithcoats to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 5 years for the weapons charge. The DeKalb County District Attorney's Office officially announced the verdict and sentencing on May 12, 2025, bringing a measure of legal closure to this tragic case. As bailiffs led him from the courtroom, Shaniyah Rodriguez stood watching, the necklace with 2 hearts visible against her black dress. "This isn't closure," she told reporters afterward. "There's no such thing when you've lost a child, or in my case, 2 children and a grandchild. But it is justice, and that has to be enough." Shaniyah Rodriguez's murder represents a devastating intersection of 2 epidemics in America: intimate partner violence and gun violence. Her story is tragically common. When these 2 forces converge, the results are often fatal, particularly for women who are pregnant or have recently given birth. Statistics tell a grim story. The presence of a firearm in a domestic violence situation increases the risk of homicide by 500%. For pregnant women, the danger is even more acute. Homicide is a leading cause of death during pregnancy, with intimate partners being the perpetrators in the majority of cases. What makes Shaniyah's case particularly heartbreaking is that there were warning signs, subtle at first, then increasingly obvious as her pregnancy progressed. Friends noticed Diamonte becoming more controlling and possessive. Shaniyah herself confided fears about her safety. Neighbors overheard arguments that escalated in intensity. When Shaniyah told a friend she was scared about what he might do, she was acknowledging a danger that many victims recognize but feel powerless to escape. This is why community awareness and intervention are so crucial. For those in dangerous relationships, resources exist that might have helped Shaniyah had she reached out. The National Domestic Violence Hotline 1-800-799-7233 provides 24/7 crisis support. Local women's shelters offer emergency, housing, and safety planning. Legal aid organizations can help secure protective orders. Community-based advocacy programs provide counseling and support. But the responsibility for prevention doesn't rest solely on victims. Communities must work together to create environments where domestic violence is neither tolerated nor hidden. This means, first, we must teach healthy relationship skills from an early age. Schools, religious institutions, and families all play a role in showing young people what respectful relationships look like and how to resolve conflicts without violence. Second, we need to strengthen economic supports for families. Financial stress and dependency often trap victims in dangerous situations. Programs that provide job training, affordable housing, and childcare can create pathways to independence. Third, we must address the deadly combination of domestic violence and firearms. Laws that restrict access to guns for those with histories of domestic violence save lives. These laws exist in many states, but are inconsistently enforced. Fourth, healthcare providers need better training to identify patients at risk. Prenatal visits offer a crucial opportunity to screen for domestic violence and connect pregnant women with resources. Had Shaniyah's doctor recognized the danger she was in, intervention might have been possible. Finally, we must support survivors and families affected by gun violence. The trauma extends far beyond the immediate victims. Shaniyah Rodriguez lost not only her daughter and granddaughter, but also her sense of security and trust. Comprehensive victim services, including long-term counseling and financial assistance, are essential for healing. Shaniyah's story reminds us that domestic violence thrives in silence and isolation. When a pregnant woman confides that she's afraid, when neighbors hear concerning arguments, when friends notice controlling behavior, these moments represent opportunities for intervention that could save lives. The tragedy of Shaniyah and Milliani Rodriguez should compel us to action. Their deaths were not inevitable. They were the result of choices, not just Diamonte's choice to pull the trigger, but also our collective choices about how we respond to warning signs, how we structure our laws and institutions, and how seriously we take the threat of intimate partner violence. By recognizing these patterns and taking action, we honor Shaniyah's memory and work toward a future where other young mothers and their children are protected from similar fates. In a quiet corner of a Georgia cemetery, two headstones stand side by side. The larger one reads, Shaniyah Monet Rodriguez, beloved daughter, with her dates of birth and death. Beside it, a smaller stone bears the name, Milliani Rodriguez, and a single date, February 2nd, 2023, marking both her birth and the beginning of her brief journey. Fresh flowers regularly appear on both graves, a testament to lives remembered and mourned. Shaniyah Rodriguez visits these graves weekly, often bringing small tokens, a stuffed animal for Milliani, a favorite book for Shaniyah. These moments of connection have become part of her healing process, a way to maintain bonds that death has altered but not severed. They're still my girls, Adrian says. Just because they're not here doesn't mean they're not still mine to love. In the aftermath of the trial, Adrian transformed her grief into purpose. She established the Shaniyah and Milliani Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting pregnant women in dangerous relationships. The foundation provides emergency housing, transportation to medical appointments, and advocacy services for women seeking to leave abusive partners. If one young woman finds safety because of what happened to my daughter, then Shaniyah's story is power beyond her death, Adrian explains. The foundation has already assisted dozens of women in the Atlanta area, creating pathways to safety that Shaniyah never found. Adrian also speaks regularly at high schools and community centers, sharing her daughter's story with unflinching honesty. Her presentations focus on recognizing warning signs of domestic violence and the increased dangers during pregnancy. Students often approach her afterward, sometimes disclosing their own experiences with relationship violence or concerns about friends. The impact of Shaniyah and Milliani's story extends throughout the Atlanta community. Local hospitals have strengthened their screening protocols for domestic violence during prenatal care. The DeKalb County Police Department has expanded its domestic violence unit and improved training for officers responding to intimate partner disputes. A bill named in Shaniyah's honor, expanding protections for pregnant women seeking restraining orders, is currently moving through the Georgia legislature. Perhaps most powerfully, Adrian has created a memorial scholarship at Shaniyah's former high school. Each year, it provides financial support to a graduating senior who plans to study nursing, the career Shaniyah had once hoped to pursue. The scholarship ensures that while Shaniyah's dreams were cut short, they can live on through others. My daughter and granddaughter only had a short time in this world, Adrian says, but their impact will last for generations. The story of Shaniyah and Milliani Rodriguez is more than a tragedy. It's a call to action. It challenges us to recognize the warning signs of domestic violence, to intervene when we see someone at risk, and to create communities where such violence becomes unthinkable. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to Dark Trace Crime Stories. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories that need to be told. By bringing these narratives to light, we honor victims like Shaniyah and Milliani, support survivors like Adrian, and work toward a future where fewer families experience such devastating loss. What other stories do you think need more attention? Let us know in the comments below.